All right, I will call the meeting to order of the Joint Board of Coalition of Communities 2.0. Welcome, everybody. Thank you to the board members who are here. And our first item of business is our minutes review. Did you have a chance to look at the minutes?
I motion to approve. I wasn't here last
Oh,
meeting.
you weren't here last meeting, so I'll second. All those in favor? Aye. All right, so the minutes are approved. And the real reason that we're here is membership of this board. So we are down to just the three of us, which means that we always have to be here.
Why
in
we're
order
down to
to
three
conduct
because other
business.
people
We've had two resignations.
have. I see.
So Joy did not run again for selectman, and Phil has moved to another
I know.
position, so.
Have anybody from those towns been appointed or volunteered to get on the board?
Phil's replacement. is not gonna appoint.
No. Now, should we go back to those communities and ask them to replace people? Or
so.
do you want to do it from? Because in the agreement, in the memorandum of understanding, it says that it's up to the three of us to appoint, choose, appoint, whatever you want to use the term, fill the two vacancies until the end of the agreement.
So I don't think we need, we have the whole membership we can select from. I don't think nothing is committing us to the particular communities that are sent people our respective communities. So I think we need to fill the board. We don't know what's gonna happen in those towns or when they're gonna be resolved. And we've got to carry on the business that we have.
I'll go along with that.
Do either of you have ideas, any ideas for,
I nominate Paul Shane to be,
to be a
Something
management
for you.
representative?
Just another thing to be on.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for Paul to fill the management vacancy. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. And all those opposed. So unanimous. Welcome, you're here. So we now have four members. The other vacancy is an elected official vacancy. So I guess sending an email out to all of the communities and asking for nominations of elected official, unelected official to fill the remaining term.
Yeah, they just had that one at town meetings. some
Yeah,
still have
right,
town meetings coming up
exactly.
until May.
So I'll work with Jim. I'll get an email out
Okay.
to all of the membership. And then we will
I can send him an
move
update.
forward at the next meeting to appoint an official, an elected official. Okay. All right. Well, we can turn it over.
Okay,
for Legislative update.
well, I think everyone can hear me okay, Jane? Just want to make sure.
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great, thank you.
The voice of
Oh,
God.
I know.
I know, this is what I'm like,
This is great.
this is
Oh,
great.
yeah, there you go.
So I'm going to assume you received our recent update on Friday with the tracking chart. So you'll see many of the bills have been acted on. The House had I'm sure you saw in the newspapers, began a session 3 days last week. The Senate met on Thursday, so many bills were, their crossover date is the 31st, that's coming up. So every bill's been acted on. You'll see many in your chart had been either tabled, inexpedient to legislate, all that. I'll pause there. I don't know if you had any specific questions on the update as a whole on the tracking chart before I dive into some of the bills we're still following and just want to bring to your attention. And I don't know if you have any questions?
I just have a question. Well, I
Yes.
think it's Senate Bill 344 that Senator Daniels putting.
Yes.
I know that they haven't met again, it's been pushed off to another meeting, but what's the behind the words discussion?
So behind the words discussion, he's trying to still get the votes. It was addressed on the Senate. I apologize. It keeps looking like I need to look at the screen. I don't know. I see
No
Jane.
problem.
but he is trying to get the votes on that.
Yes.
It's interesting, you know, he's trying to address the concerns. Senator Gray from Rochester, he just adamantly feels that you need to be present, that's that. And I can understand his concerns. So they recessed it last Thursday. It should be, it's got to get acted on by the 31st. So the Senate's meeting this Thursday. And I think he's going to still try and work with that. It's interesting. Senator Hennessy, you know, from her district has concerns. I look at it this way, I would think sometimes with smaller towns, again, it's a choice. It's not they shall.
Right.
It's a choice that if one of our communities, Littleton or whatever, feels this would be conducive. It's just, was interesting to listen to the debate, Sean. So he's still working on that.
My understanding is there may be another amendment coming forward,
There probably will be.
but any idea what it might be, because nobody seems to know what it
Yeah,
is.
no. Now, matter of fact, I had swung by his office, we were coming over, he had a question on something else. And his assistant, is very nice. She knows I'm kind of keeping the pulse and, you know, she's like, he's been meeting with leadership to try and work with this. So it's all kind of quiet right now. But I assume we'll hear more on Thursday.
Yes.
We'll keep you posted on that. And just a couple of other matters to point out on House Bill 1073, it's modifying the attorney exemptions. I know we were tracking that last year. I assume that still might be of some interest per se. That did pass the House. It'll go before the Senate. My guess is that the New Hampshire Municipal Association will really put the heat on to get that killed, because again, they supported, I think, my memory's correct, brought forward that language last year. The AG's office supported it. Of course, the Right to Know Coalition opposed it, so we'll see what happens in the Senate. And then I know there'll high interest of House Bill 1033, the prohibition of recipients of state or local grants for using funds for lobbying. It was interesting, that got tabled. I understand the Municipal Association worked very hard to get that tabled, much to the chagrin of the prime sponsor of that bill. But it was, you know, one of those, it's funny to watch the House in actions, like all of a sudden, motion to table, non-debate, and that was it. You know, maybe a couple of parliamentary inquiries and it was over. But there were other groups that also expressed some concerns with that. And they had several, I think 3 or 4 work sessions to try and tweak it, because they did hear, you know, the House members on the Legislative Administration Committee heard from, you know, their towns. So they were trying to accomplish a goal of the sponsor and appease the towns, but anyhow, that got tabled. 2 of the bills, if I may, just to bring to your attention on updates. And I've been tracking, it wasn't of interest initially, and I will add it to the tracking if, you know, you feel need be. So House Bill 1627 has to do with the education freedom accounts and establishing administrator in the Department of Education. If you recall last fall, a couple of the bills that were filed with education funding, one was used as a vehicle for a joint work session between House Finance and House Education to say, how do we, you know, what's the mechanism? So you know where the Republicans are versus where the Democrats are. But they dived into the free and reduced meal program. How do we get more money from that? How do we work with the Medicaid department, CMS? They could, that's getting over my head on how that all comes together. On this particular bill, yesterday, Representative Karen Umberger from not Conway, right outside Conway, is it Kearsarge? She's up in that
Oh,
area.
she's no.
Okay, thank you. She brought an amendment forward that basically would allow the Department of Education to seek a waiver from the USDA and the CMS regarding the Medicaid Direct Certification Program as it pertains to free and reduced meals. What that means to this group is that according to the Department of Education, in 2025, we'll see a potential $60 million that we apply to adequacy. That came out of committee. 4-1 vote, excuse me, 5-1 vote. It's going to be acted on by House Finance tomorrow. So House Finance has 3 divisions. This came out of Division 2. They voted 5-1 on to pass. And the only thing I would say to you, please don't ask me the correlation between the waiver and how we get that 60 million. I know what a waiver means, but I'm still trying to get my head around, like, I guess if they can get A, then B comes with it, so that's a chunk of change.
Which House bill is this?
This is 1627. So the full committee of House Finance is meeting tomorrow. I suspect this is going to pass. And then on to the House for March 31st for their session. Matter of fact, Representative Mary Heath from Manchester was thrilled with this because this will help hurt the city with the free and reduced meal program. And again, this is another venue looking to address adequacy. Now, I think there'll always be an ongoing debate, let's face it, but this is something interesting that can come up.
And there's no indication where the additional 60 million will come from?
Good question. I'm going to assume, and this is a big assumption, typically these are federal dollars. I don't know if they'll want the state to match X. If the feds give us X, we give Y. I'm not sure. So I hope to, Representative Karen Umber, who was not, I did not see her today. I hope to connect with her tomorrow to say, she's a very nice woman. I just, and you can go to her with anything and say, could you please educate me on how this is going to work? I'm trying
Well,
to
as
get my
long
head
as
around.
it's not a state, it's not state funded, because we know we didn't get that.
Right. Right. So from the discussion I listened to yesterday, and Mark Manganiello, if I'm saying that correctly, basically, this is what he had said, that this dollars would apply in 2025. Because again, we'll have elections next year, we'll be working on a new budget, and that's how that will go forward there.
Well, that might be because it's the money coming out of Washington is our earmark for an existing program, rather than putting it back, because the feds don't want money back. They want you to expend it.
Well, it's
And
okay,
they-
but
then they
if
do
it's
it over
only
the-
one biennium, they still will have a hole. They shouldn't be using one-time funding
I know
to
they
fill
do
that,
anyway.
but they do.
But they do, and it's funny you bring that up because she referenced again in the budget that was passed last year that we're in now, the fiscal year. Remember they, reduced the SWEP to 100 million? And that's the one time. So she's looking to fill or to have a replacement, shall we say. So we're gonna keep a pulse on that. I just want to bring that to your attention, all these kind of moving parts that happen now. And lastly,
Well, just to follow up on that.
Yes, please.
So I lost the train of thought. The original bill did something, but there's an amendment that does something.
Yep.
But we don't know what the amendment is yet?
yes,
or-
we do, actually,
do.
we do. And what I can do, I have it here, all this copies here, or I can absolutely get this, scanned, to you for Friday's report. The original bill basically dealt with appropriating an administrator in the Department of Education to administer the Education Freedom Account. And Karen Umberger, who's the chair of House Finance, saw it as an opportunity to tack on her amendment. It was considered a non-germane, so they had the hearing yesterday. I mean, it's creative in a way. Again, long-term sustainability, I can't speak to. But it seems that leadership is behind it, so.
Well, I think there are two issues. There's the short term, where does funding come from?
Mhm.
And then there's sustainability, right? I mean, seems to me we need the answer, those two answers.
So the next step, the full finance committee will act on it Wednesday. I will suspect it will be adopted, and then it goes to the House on the 31st. And we'll head to the Senate, we'll see what they do.
Does it have bipartisan support, or is that
It
gonna be-
does. Let me just say this, that in the work, in Division 2, it was bipartisan, both the three Democrats on Division 2, Representative Bucco, Representative Mary Heath, and Representative Murray all voted for it. The lone vote was Republican-led Turcott, who's very fiscally conservative, so that did not surprise me. And I suspect the full finance committee will have several fiscally conservative members, but I think it will pass. And then what the House will do, sometimes that's anybody's guess. And as it all depends, like a town meeting, on who shows up that day.
Right.
If it does pass, and then the Senate will tackle it. But those are two questions. Again, we'll keep a pulse on it, keep it posted.
So back on that. bill,
Yes.
The original intent of that bill was to create an administrator for the education freedom accounts. What is
Okay.
the status of those vouchers, those education freedom accounts where people can use that money and transfer from one place to the other? That's not up and running yet, right?
I understand, yes,
It is.
if they've been slightly, I think you've read in the paper, overwhelmed, I think initial predictions were what? Pick a number, I don't know.
There's some small number. They were
Small
gonna use it
number,
out of the-
1,000,
out of the
now,
trust fund, they're gonna pay for
now
that.
it's like 8,000, so there's been there was a number of bills. And not all would have been on the tracking chart because of the, the title, just so, to repeal the charter schools. There were many attempts of bills to repeal it. And they all, either the House killed them or they got tabled. So that program, to the chagrin of some, is still alive going forward.
But if they actually distributed any money to be able to move from one school to the other.
I understand, and I'm not the expert on that, I understand that they have. Because I will tell you this, that when they had the hearings on those bills to repeal it, you want to see parents come out in droves? When you have to, I mean, they're using double rooms right now, the legislative office building, the hearings. When they have to move you to rep hall, I mean, they're coming out in droves. So I'm gonna assume not all that show up are receiving it, but some, if not many are.
There seems to be a push in general in the last couple of years and growing about more choice, whether it's an individual or even modifying cooperative school districts and how they get in and get out and so on. We see that
You are
happen.
correct.
And there's it's not going long before, and you have declining enrollments. So
Yeah, you are
increasing
correct.
taxes, declining enrollment, and I want to send my child someplace else.
Yep.
There's going to be more and more of that. How that shakes down into others,
Exactly. I don't have an answer.
Well, if they write the trust fund for that purpose,
That's a problem.
that's a problem. And that's where it's supposed to come from.
Right.
You have 8,000 parents in there. I forget the amount that it provides, but let's say it's $10,000. Do the math there.
Yeah, but if it goes down, remember they used to walk up to the local municipalities, I want to go to the school that it was designed to. Maybe send a check over to the next town for $19,000.
Yeah, but it doesn't work that way. It comes out of the trust fund right now.
Right, I'm just saying now, that where it's, the morphing of this will be interesting.
It will be.
Because they'll turn around and say, why go to get it out of the fund of the government? There's already plenty of money in every school district,
the
just move the
local
money to a
schools.
different school, another public school perhaps, but nonetheless. And then it will be another public school, private, but not necessarily local school, something like that.
Right.
The bulk of that, but that's where I think things seem to be. And there's more and more bills on it.
Oh, yeah, it's been fascinating to watch the activism by the parents. They're coming out with what they want. I mean, somebody said it well, I think it was representative, like, well, they're consumers too. They want, the choice for their kids. It's been interesting to watch. And we won't even go down the debates on the facial mask in schools. That's a whole other issue in that sense, but you're right. This is evolving and morphing to something,
Most school would be using fairly packed with but as soon as the governor released that, they'll disappear.
Yeah.
So as more pressure gets on the legislature to give more choice, and they're all showing up, they want to get reelected, that's what they're starting to think.
And right, and that's exactly, you're right. And they are showing up. It's been interesting to watch, just outside looking in for a second. So,
Just looking at the amendment little screen.
no, I have it right here. Would you
I
like?
don't quite understand where the connection is, other than
Oh,
the
that-
formula gives you
Just
bonus
pass
points
that
for the
down.
number of free and reduced lunch kids you got.
Take a look at that. Like I said, I'll send out copies instead of trying to strain your eyes from your phone. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to get the nexus as well. All I know that the department.
Medicaid direct certification is, that's a pilot program. So whatever that means. Someone's trying to do a Medicare arrangement, maybe, I don't know.
I hope to connect with Representative Umberger.
That's so much work.
What's nice having everybody back is that you have these folks at the State House Cap and they, she's great. I can say, can you educate me? I don't get it.
Okay, where's the nexus?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I hear it. I hear a number, but how do we get that number? Because I know what a waiver means. I just not there.
It's the pot of money that's available at this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Somebody identified.
So, and one other bill I want to bring to your attention, I have it up here, bear with me. Don't chuckle just yet. Having to do with marijuana and the legalization of such.
The drug cartel bill, you mean?
Exactly.
State
You
drug
heard about it.
State drug-
So,
already established, they're gonna, how they're gonna do all that.
exactly, so.
Start their own bank. It's gonna be good.
Well, this is the thing, this has been worked on, it passed the policy committee, criminal justice and public safety, and it was interesting, a side note, the chair of that, Daryl Abbas is from Salem, and he will be announcing his candidacy for state senator from Salem, looking to replace Chuck Morris, that's just a sidebar. But it's not before Ways and Means Committee, because they look at the revenue and the potential revenue. I think the marijuana folks were saying this could bring in like another 200, 300 million to New Hampshire. Department of Revenue said not quite, maybe 50 million. Bottom line is a lot of the chatter had to do how will this be distributed to, for example, Department of Health and Human Services, Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services, and Education Tax Relief. So there was chatter that whatever the revenue may be, to apply for education tax relief.
This week,
Till something else.
Till something else.
something shiny went by, and then it'll be something else they'll spend it on. My understanding is that's not gonna survive the Senate, the drug cartel. Papa Escobar is not gonna be broken out of prison to run it. So that's, I guess, not gonna be- They're gonna spring loose again. You gotta have experienced people running.
That is true.
No, that's true, that
Need
is
some
true,
expert, for sure.
but and
The
it's.
problem is they cut that $100 million out of the education tax last year. And they
Well,
gotta-
that's where the
they want to
60
renew it
million
somehow,
Well, no,
otherwise it
that's where
jumps
the
100
60
million.
million
so-
is trying to plug that hole.
Right,
And they're just using another one-time source of funding. And
This
then
is
they're-
true.
it's just,
yeah.
they're scrambling at the 11th hour, trying to fill it.
They go,
Someday they're gonna turn to us and just say, sorry, we couldn't find anything. And, oh, by the way, this will happen in 2 days, but
Like the retirement system.
Exactly.
Funding that.
Oh. That was just, again,
All right.
something to bring to your attention on those bills. So I think that unless there's other questions, again, we're coming to crossover. It's nice in a sense that we have fewer bills to watch, but where it gets a little tricky is that I have to look at every amendment because these are where some of these things get. And then when they get to a committee or conference, it gets even funkier. So this is the,
At
this
least
is.
got another month for that.
Yeah, so the silly season is coming upon us.
So I go back to,
Yes.
is there any real significance? I know that the rule significance or difference between an inexpedient to legislate versus a table.
Mhm.
The net effect is usually the same.
Right.
Why is one method selected versus the other? Other than it be sponsor feel better because it was just tabled.
A courtesy. A courtesy because up until crossover, it's just a simple majority to remove the bill off the table.
Right.
After crossover, I believe it's 2/3, it's a high level. I think the number's 2/3, so it could be as a courtesy.
So we hold our
Well,
breath
like
till
in-
crossover.
Right, exactly, and same for interim study. That's another polite way to the sponsor to say, well, we'll study it, and we go, you're in the second year, it's almost game over.
Yeah.
If you want anything to happen, there'll be a new bid next year, so, yeah. And if they really don't like you, it's just ITL. So, anyhow. Well, and Jay, I don't know if you had any questions, but kind of concludes my report on that legislative update.
No, I don't, but thank you so much for that analysis. It's great to hear, the story behind the story, and what's coming down, what might be heading our way. So thanks very much for that great summary.
You're very welcome. And do we have anyone else that has zoomed in? I don't want to ignore anybody.
Matt, anybody there?
Anybody else, Matt?
So we have only Jane as a panelist, but we also have one attendee, Bonnie Moroni. I apologize if I mispronounced that.
Does Bonnie have any questions for us?
Not that I see. Bonnie,
Okay.
if you can hear me, you can type in the chat, or you should be able to type in the chat if you have any questions.
Okay, any other communications? I do not have anything else.
But before we move
Yeah,
on,
Paul.
one other thing, I asked Jim this before and it's gone, lasted for a couple updates and then they've disappeared again. I asked for some sort of color coding on the spreadsheet, only in terms of rather than having to scroll down and look at each one. Oh yeah, I remember that from last week. Nothing's changed. I remember that one.
Okay,
If we could do some sort of color coding on when something has changed on a bill that's listed on that spreadsheet, that would be extremely helpful. Then you could just scroll down to the ones
Yeah.
that actually changed from the previous.
So
so maybe just to highlight
I do,
when there is a
yeah, I
change.
can, what I can do, the bills that have been killed. So, I'll just take off the chart, make it easier for reading. Is that
One or the
correct?
other, if you're definite, there's no resurrection from
There's
the
no-
dead.
Yeah, there's no resurrection on that, and it might be best to, I can really do a deep dive after we get through crossover, so I can remove the bills that have been killed. Anything that's tabled for my own peace of mind, I'll keep them on.
Mhm.
But then with that said, at least I know I don't have to worry about them per se, I'll just keep them there. But I hear your point, for
You know,
example,
if one row changed because you had a house phone, do it yellow.
Yeah,
I can do
Yeah,
that, that's easy.
From the previous.
Oh,
yeah,
that's
from the
easy.
previous. report.
For the previous, so I can, for example, House Bill 1073, which was the attorney exemptions, the client work product, that had been amended. It still kind of does the same thing, but at least I could highlight that. What I can do is I'll highlight the title. And then you'll see in the status, pass the House with amendment. And then when you click on the bill number,
Anything that distinguishes it from the previous
You got it.
report.
I can do that.
Okay,
Be a lot easier, a lot quicker to. scroll.
I understand, believe me, when I get my updates from Advocate, they all come out, I'm going. I feel your pain, no problem.
any other communications or anything? Any other visits?
Well, the only concern I have is when people are getting lulled into, I think, into complacency, like there's no more issue in adequacy. But we gotta try to remember to tell people it's, well, it's quiet, other issues that taken it away. They're still out there turning around talking about how to move money around.
Just say, yeah,
So, the reality is, we don't wanna see the group shrink,
Right.
for budgeting reasons, or whatever.
Mhm.
Because we're just gonna, this is not gonna go away. I think right now, the political winds are pushing around, but the parents are more interested in choice. And the school districts and the teachers, I think, they see some hands-on in the opposition to it. So right now, everybody's busy, but as soon as that goes away. they'll
Well,
jump
and I
right back
think
into this.
everybody's kind of satiated with additional monies floating around from different sources.
There's a ton of items.
And that's both in the communities and in the schools. So I think when that starts to dry up, next biennium's definitely going to be different because they'll be looking for replacement funds.
Compound that with the freedom accounts.
Oh,
being
exactly.
established.
Yeah,
And, yeah. I foresee, no matter which way the next election occurs, whether it's left or right, you're gonna meet groups looking for more money. The right will want more money for the freedom accounts because they'll realize, that subsidy isn't really that great. We need more. Flips on the other side, then we'll be back to the education division.
Yeah.
Funding formula, and we'll have that. Speaking of funding, the only other topic I had was what's the status on the building? Have we,
we
for the members?
haven't sent out the second year billing,
Right.
but we need to update we were going to use the most recent valuations.
That was the one I
Um,
gave you in January, excuse me. Right after the January meeting, I updated it with the list of recently available.
Okay,
Equalized
then we
values.
will use that one
Right.
for the billing. We haven't
Yeah.
sent it out.
Just made a small tick on
Yeah.
each one.
Yeah.
But not much.
We done.
So we'll get-
Using the prior or the current year. They just
We
barely
use
getting
1
up.
year
It's
behind.
really the 2021.
2021
Equalized
valuations,
values,
because we used 20 for the.
because they haven't equalized the 2020.
It's,
Well, is it? They haven't equalized 2021, so it's 2020, excuse me. The original ones we used is 2019, first year. then the next equalized value that reports come out in
Well, the
January of 2020
the equalized
is
valuation,
21. We're only 2 years behind. Once they finally do
Okay.
all the,
because the equalized valuations just came out.
right, but then there's a 30-day appeal period, so they
Right.
don't finalize anything. So the report for the 2020 really doesn't come out till later this year,
For 20.
just for 21. right?
Already does, we got to put it.
All right.
So that's why the agreement was, I think, the most recently available
Which is
targeting
20.
January's
Okay,
update.
I'll go over that. I will send everyone a copy of it, just saying this is what I'm gonna have.
Just let me know if you
Judy
can find out.
Bill.
and resend it.
No, I'm sure I have.
Right, so when, refresh my memory, when we set our budget.
I believe that it is April. I believe it's our next meeting. And we're supposed to have a full membership meeting,
Right,
which is when we set that budget.
right, because we're not sending those.
So actually, we won't send those assessments out until after that April meeting and that vote.
Get a membership, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that meeting is set for. There's a joint board on the 19th. And I think that was the day that we were gonna potentially change to the full member.
And what about the positions, executive board positions?
The executive board positions are for the 2 years.
And we have
So,
an annual meeting in July, which I think that's when we
Correct.
decide, do we continue on as a
Right.
group? And then if so, we elect officers. then.
so will the April meeting be the full membership?
Well, if we're gonna vote budget,
I think it should be, right?
but we're gonna warn budget in advance and also the assessments, that people know that this is what they're gonna be voting on, because we don't have a prepared budget yet.
No,
Oh, yeah, we had a performer that
we had a 2-year
a
budget.
2-year budget.
We had a 2-year
adopted-
budget
We
with an
didn't officially
estimate.
adopt the second year of it.
That's right.
But it was shown.
It was shown.
Because it was a 2-year.
As a projected.
And I think our last discussion. I did not make any changes. Because there were some adjustments, because the website's up, so that's a one-time cost, but now you have to maintain it. So there was some.
Well, the other part of it is too, is obviously our law firm is gonna be, their activities are gonna start to increase when we get into the budget piece next year. So make sure we have enough in there to deal with that. That public relations campaign that might have to be launched to advocate on behalf of that.
And that was the other thing Jim was going to update, was the work plan. And communication plan.
Yeah, we had a $66,400 budget this year and 70,200. I mean, last year was 66, this year was 70,200 projected. So the April meeting should be just the joint board. We should get Jim's projections, right? Any modifications.
The plan, yeah.
The plan.
Yeah.
We should look at this projected budget versus what his work plan is. And then we would have to have the full meeting in May to finalize the budgets. Because we can't do our meeting and we don't have time, I don't think, to get all of that done. And what I can do is say that when I send out my request for the elected official nomination, I can say, we're working on the budget, here's a reminder of what we had. And what we projected, and here's what your assessment would be based on that. But we'll finalize the budget on April 19th, and then we'll have a full membership meeting to ratify that. In May. And I'll check the MOU to make sure that doesn't violate anything.
Yeah, I think we can call.
That sounded okay.
Full membership member.
Anytime.
The only full membership meeting that is expressly stated in the
Required.
MU, as I recall, is the
To
July.
July.
Right.
But I don't
But
think
we
we
can
should
call any
wait,
other.
I don't think we should wait on the
No,
budget
no.
until July, that's too long. Okay,
And lastly, I know Jim had mentioned something to me this morning about the update to the website. They are working on that. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
okay,
He called me, I was on the road and listening, so if my memory's good, it had to do with the website updates. I'm not sure, but remind about that to follow up, to see where that stands.
Jane, do you see any problem with that plan on the budget or anything that we're violating in the agreement that you can think of?
I have not reviewed that portion of the agreement in a while, so I
Okay.
don't have a memory of that. The only thing that you've mentioned is, I'm wondering procedurally, if rather than have if we're having a meeting of the membership, we still have quorum, issues for that, and we want to make that in May. I'm wondering what the provisions are relative to amending the annual meeting. You know what I mean? Could you kill two birds with one stone? Or is that a direct amendment of the MOU that has to be approved by the board? Or can we do it right there at the May meeting? Say this is also our annual meeting, so that we meet once rather than twice with the membership? I'm just worried about quorum issues.
And given that it has to be in person.
Oh,
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Have them reassemble in May and then again in whether it's June or July, I'm forgetting, but it's just a thought to think about.
we can look at.
Yeah, I don't remember the amendment process. I think there's an amendment
I
paragraph.
think it has to be approved by the full board, but I'm wondering if we could propose the amendment at the May meeting that this is also the annual and have it voted on. And then we can,
Or have an article, or have an agenda item that is to suspend and to have it count as the annual meeting.
I was gonna say, suspend or waive.
Suspend or.
Yeah.
Right. That's not- it
yeah,
Doesn't necessarily mean an amendment process. It's just for
Right.
this year.
Yeah.
Expediency says let's-
and COVID issues and are still a concern. So yeah, I think something like that, so we can just kind of kill two birds with one stone.
It may be challenging to get a physical quorum in July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, so we'll look at the MOU and figure that out and see if we can just have an agenda item to suspend
Great.
the requirement, because we're gonna need 14, with 26, 27 members, we're gonna need to have 14 people here.
We could do something special with the quorum issue for that. I can't remember. There's some other committee that I'm on that we deal with that because it's always a problem. I don't know, I'll have to look it up myself. Modify the quorum requirements for
I
this.
think at the time we were operating under COVID, so we did it electronically and.
I have another committee, I'm on, we changed the quorum requirements to a much smaller.
Well, I would, we could look at potentially amending this to be a quorum of the joint board with the membership in attendance remotely. And
Yeah, I
just
don't
have
think
it,
that meets RSA
you
anyway.
don't think it does?
But anyway, okay.
We'll have to look at it. All right. So we'll get the budget information out with the request for the names and put everyone on notice for April 19th. And if there's any issues.
The only downside of doing that was, I think July was picked because it was gonna be the legislative wrap up, what happened for the year.
Right now, there's nothing on the table. It's going to threaten, it's going to go to donor towns. There's nothing there that will indicate that that's going to happen this particular year. Next year.
Except for which bill was it that Luno and Finance Committee sent to interim study, and they were really gonna do was an interim study rather than,
Well,
Just-
what's interesting, what might replace that is this House Bill 1627, the amendment. That, because they have not met, obviously, because they've been busy with their committees. That doesn't mean that Luna won't push to try and meet. You know, I still keep a pulse on that.
you remember, Jane, what number that was with you and I? took?
Was it 607? Was that the complicated equation?
I
That-
think, I'll double check, but somehow, you know, Jen, you get numbers in your head, I have, let me pull it up. Let me see if I can find it. I have like 625 in my head, but let me pull up 607.
Six,
I don't know why 640 hit me.
608 or 607? Yeah, that, I am terrible with numbers, so don't. But I just remember, it's the Formula One you're referring to, Paul?
Yes, they-
Yeah.
very long,
Very complicated and
and-
confusing. Yeah,
because it had really was pulling parts of the commission study in and out of it.
yes.
The interim study can be finished for this session.
No, it would be over
Potentially.
the summer and report.
Okay,
Right.
so there's
yeah.
still nothing that's
That's right,
gonna
there's nothing
affect
that's-
this budget.
Well,
Or
we'll have to
next
have perhaps staff at the study session
But we
meetings.
had an allowance in the summer
Right,
for study committees. That's in the budget.
Okay, so House Bill 608. 608, determining funding for adequate education. That's one that got tabled. And that got tabled. Nothing's happened there. 607. Local education savings accounts for students, that also got tabled. And just so you know, that come crossover March 31st, if any of these bills are not taken off the table, will require 2/3. I believe that's the number. Now,
Yeah, they did. And they would never get to the same thing.
no, for some reason, it was, I have,
Let me look on my record, just 1 second.
I have it in here. I know which one they used. Maybe it was 623. Oh, my goodness. Yes, House Bill 623. That was the Luna bill. That's the one. Yep, interim study. That's the one that we're gonna use. They had that joint committee, Jane.
I had 1680.
1680?
Yep.
That, oh, that one's interim study. That's a different
Yes.
one.
But
Yes.
that's, see, I don't think it is. That
Oh,
one
yeah.
was the one they were picking.
That was the other Luna bill.
Yes,
Yes.
that was the one that was kind of being held over for study to,
But in both of
with
those,
jeopardies.
but in both of those cases, it is something we can monitor over the summer. It's not going to be brought up for decision this session.
No,
Right.
it's pretty much dead. for
Yeah, it
this
is pretty
session.
much. I mean, does not mean that
Yeah,
Representative Luna, which I suspect if he's running again, which I suspect he is, because he's from Hopkinton, I suspect he'd get reelected. He could put in the same bill again.
No, and that's
Different, yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, it was the 1680, and that's the one that I think, would be a very good idea to watch, because you'll see who the stakeholders are in the study committee, and it was complicated, but it was really a summary, a disjointed one of the Commission on Education's funding recommendations converted to some,
Yeah.
a disjointed formula.
If I recall, Representative Luna chaired that commission.
Yes, he did.
Okay, yeah, so, oh, thank you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, that's on the tracking chart, Jane, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any other?
Well, when you send this letter out to the elected officials. in
Yeah.
the city, you're obviously apprised of all the benefits being on the executive board, right?
Yes, absolutely. All the pennies.
It's a sales picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wouldn't hurt, to create a paragraph or two about our activities this year. Not to make this an epistle,
No,
but,
It's okay, Mark, right?
right. And Jim and his group can,
Yeah.
fill in the blanks, we monitored the X number of bills.
Yeah.
They've all, you've been unsuccessful because we've been so successful.
that's right.
And the next year
Wait,
is likely to be the bellwether year, because that's what we're gonna see.
Yeah.
Right.
If there's gonna be action, it's gonna occur next year.
It's interesting.
Well, that's right. And the importance of staying together as a
Yes.
group
Right.
going into the new biennium.
Thus far adequacy is like a volcano. settle down right
Then,
now.
oh,
Won't take-
Vesuvius.
won't take
Vesuvius
much.
was silent before it exploded. right?
That's right.
It was interesting, and Jane, I know you know this, but Senator Tom Sherman has thrown his hat in to seek, the corner office here. Senator Jay Khan from Keene is endorsing him, and on Twitter, Senator Sherman thanked him, and he says, Senator Khan is I forget the noun he used, but having to, protect public education, so you now see in the chatter on Twitter, and I'm sure there'll be more and more. That's in, and Jane, I don't know if you saw, but Representative Deb Altschuler is gonna throw her hat in to be the, hopefully the next, well, never mind, hopefully the next senator from District 24.
Yes, I was aware of both of those, and it will be interesting on the
Yeah.
education funding issue, because I believe Senator Sherman and obviously Senator Khan was, if not the chair, he was the vice chair of the commission. He was very heavily involved in the commission study.
We should also at some point over the summer, just think about looking at the 2021 assessments and the equalization to see if we didn't pick up any new communities. Because the way, I don't know about your communities, but we're changing 29%. Where our valuation went from equalized from 98 to 71 in 1 year.
All right,
So,
it's the same thing.
yeah, but,
We went from-
but so that may create additional.
I did check with this Kennedy down there.
Mhm.
It's all over the state. As soon as you do it, your updates, it's.
Right,
Well,
some
what
people,
would
some
they
in the
have
block
funding
that are
for?
eligible,
It-
everybody increased like this, so.
Well, yeah,
But there might be some hangers right there.
exactly, because their valuations are gonna raise more money than they have students. And they didn't change the per pupil number.
Right.
So that's gonna naturally, I think, enlarge the potential.
We should probably too invite the senator who's running Sherman to a meeting with us, even if it's virtual participation, so we can
Mhm.
see where he stands on this issue. Try to pin it down, of course,
Any gubernatorial candidate going into the
I
election.
suspect it'll be along with all of the Democrats, but
And the other chatter too of candidates of possibly Gary Hirschberg or Berger. I'm trying to get that from, remember Stony Fields, he started Stony Fields, is it Hirschberg or Hirschberger? Hirschberg?
Berg.
That gentleman. And I'm sure there'll be others, the filing deadline, if my memory is correct, is like the second week in June, and it might be like 8 or 10 days. So I'm sure there'll be more, be interesting.
right, but Sherman seems the one who's gonna be out the front for the Democrats. It would be good to try to get a definitive answer on him to the extent that we can get one, which I doubt we will.
He has a little bit of a record.
Yes.
Because when the commission did its report, he held a couple district meetings of public officials, because he represented Rye, Northampton, right, Seco, so he was sensitive to that stratum. So it's not like he's unfamiliar with the issue. Now, when you take a statewide perspective, then it's different.
Right.
Color.
Exactly.
So if we can kind of hem him in on that, to the extent that we
Yeah.
can do that, that might be in our best interest to do so.
Mhm.
And Jim had talked about doing a survey, candidate survey, to find out where they stand on issues. I don't know where that stands.
Well, the filing period, when does the filing period close?
I would have
We'll
to,
have to find out.
I can find out.
Right, but it
But
would
as
be
soon,
the
I think we
primary,
talked
the
about
primaries in
doing
June, I mean, the primaries in September is usually June is when.
Yeah, so,
Filing
but I
period,
think
sure.
we talked about that, and we said as soon as the filing period is ended,
Yeah.
then we'll get
Right.
but we should, at the
Be
April
working on it
meeting,
now.
be
What's the
working
question?
on the survey itself.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can get your questions lined up now, and once that period, like I said, I don't know if it's posted yet in the Secretary of State's office, might be too soon, but I know it's in June, like the second week, and it's a 7 to 10 day window.
In one sense, this business of freedom of counsel and choice diverts everybody's attention away from the adequacy issue. That's something that because that's a more complicated issue, but to a parent and to a voter, you know, the idea that I want to be able to go through here is something that when they show up in that droves, they tend to take their attention and energy away from the other issue.
Well, but I think it complicates matters in our communities because you could be dealing with both having to pay the adequacy number to the state and having to pay potentially some monies to parents. You know,
And
if
that's why
if they change the law and say that your school district is gonna help fund those vouchers in any way or whatever, that exacerbates our problems. Because now we're running our schools, we're paying the adequacy and potentially paying vouchers.
And people just don't really fully understand. It's certainly a complicated issue, but I mean, look what happened to, was it Croydon? Yeah. And, you know, they just grabbed a number out of the air because that's what they heard and then multiplied by X number of students and boom, they've got a budget that's half what they need. So, yeah.
So state primary election 2022, June 1 through June 10th is the filing period for all offices for state primary election.
So mid-June,
And
start
Kathy-
June meeting.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Wasn't there a bill this year that was an attempt to have the local municipality fund the freedom accounts and didn't it get killed?
Oh, there were all kinds of craziness.
I know it's so hard to track them. But you're right, those freedom accounts seem, you know, like some of those might have amendments. You know, I'm just raising that at, what did you call this? The silly season?
Exactly. No, you are correct. They were, the Dems had filed quite a few bills to repeal the EFAs.
Yeah,
And
that,
those went down.
right.
The ones,
the-
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Jane.
Sorry, but of the freedom account ones that are left, I'm wondering, because it's silly season,
Yeah. Oh,
to, you know, non-germane amendments or amendments on who pays, not the trust fund, but if there's any change to that designation, then that's something we might need to be cognizant of even these next couple of weeks.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking possible amendments, somebody, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I understood.
Again, like 1680, it's so complicated, you didn't realize buried in there that was
Mhm.
not only money from the trust fund, but it's taking it out from individual school districts from which the child came from.
So let me simplify it with a little humor. If I see amendments with certain names on it, like a Representative Lunar or Senator Khan, it'll be a red flag. So it's in the update. It's a Luna bill or a Khan bill. Let's take a look at it. So that to me, I like to simplify things and say, not that I don't look at all amendments, but certain ones I go, oh, okay. And let me say that's across.
And
any-
whoever last year was the one that sponsored all the freedom accounts. Because I think they've come forward with other bills.
Oh,
to
right.
prompt
Yeah.
Their position.
Yes, Chairman Rick Ladd from Haverhill, he's Chair of House Education, big proponent of EFA, so I understood. You know, that was just a little humor, picking on some of those good reps, but no, we do look because you just, and then especially when they get to the committees of conference, then, you know, at least I will say those amendments have to be germane. Thank goodness for little, you know, miracles like that. But I will say to the credit of the House that any amendments that are non-germane to the bill, they are having public hearings, so we're able to, you know, so it's kind of, when I see that in the calendar or my updates non-germane, I go, oops, okay, what is that gonna do? So keeps us hopping.
I don't think we need to wait on this survey we sent out because the Democrats, as we've learned from the last time, they're gonna rally on one candidate. That's pretty well known. So the candidate is the candidate.
Yeah.
I don't care who signs up after that date, but that's who the candidate's going to be. And once that season gets really heavy, it's difficult to get responses out of them. Now might be the time of before June 1st to get that survey to them and get a response from them time. That's my suggestion.
We can
I think-
definitely look
I
at
think
that.
too, any candidate, although they should be posturing themselves now for filing in June.
Right.
But just after they file, they're really springy about
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
support. So if we hit them immediately with our
Well, and
questions.
I
perhaps
think
they will-
I think waiting for the filing period was to identify all of them, all the legislature as a whole, and get the survey out to all of the candidates and do it right away. But you're right, I think,
Because
certain
20 other or
keywords-
40 more or 100 more are doing the very
That's
same
right.
thing.
exactly,
So let's get ours first.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
fresh.
okay. All right. Very good.
Motion to adjourn.
I guess I'll make my first official
There you go.
second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
All you've heard, you keep to that.
All
There you go.
opposed? All right, good. Here we go. Thank you very much,
All set?
guys.
All right. Well, Matt, I think we're all set. Jane,
Recycle.
thank you for joining. Nice to
Thank
see you.
Jane.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Sounds good. You guys have a good day.
Thank you.
That was the
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Awesome.